Hello and welcome back to Speculative Dude Presents. I'm your host, Speculative Dude. Now, it's finally time to continue the series on racing movies that I said I was going to start out with. And before I get to the actual movie today, there are a couple movies that I would really wish I could talk about, but I just wanted to bring them up because while they do entertain me, there is a problem with language barrier. And both of them are made in Asia. Mainly, this one first starting out, Full Throttle 2, Next Battle. Main character drives an FD RX-7, which is third generation RX-7. What I can see of the movie is very good. I don't, unfortunately, speak Japanese, obviously. Anybody who knows me knows my Japanese is introductory at best. So, what I see looks good. I mean, visually, it's a very good movie. I don't know about the tech talk. You guys know how big big I can be about those. So don't know about that. The story, kind of hard to tell, but you basically follow the main character, or as he wants to. Basically, you can tell that he's chasing his dream, in a manner of speaking, which is out when he's racing. There's a souped-up Toyota Supra that keeps besting him in his races, and his goal is to just keep up with that thing and keep going, and it follows him, the people he meets, the people who help him, etc. Like I said, personally, I recommend it just from what I can see. If anyone has seen this and speaks Japanese, can tell me a little bit more about it, I would love to know. So, there's that. Then the other is actually a twofold series. There's actually a drama in China called Full Throttle, Legend of Speed and Legend of Speed Fly, which was a sequel. Completely unrelated to the 1999 Legend of Speed movie, but this follows a group of, first an older brother, and then second series is his younger brother, becoming professional racers. The dramas, like I said, it's essentially it's a soap opera. Again, I don't speak Chinese. I know only a few words. Meet and greet, that kind of thing. So what I've seen is actually fairly entertaining. I own both series all the way through. Personally, I think they're interesting. Some of the camera angles can be a little wonky, but then again, when you're talking about a TV drama versus a movie, you can kind of give a little bit on that. One thing I will say that's very interesting about both Legend of Speed and Legend of Speed Fly is that at certain points in the show, the characters will stop speaking. Usually when they're speaking some kind of business, business dealings, I'm guessing so that the people around them don't know exactly what they're saying, they will stop speaking Chinese and start speaking perfect English. And I don't mean broken English at all. I mean perfect English. For a few sentences, usually, like I said, business talk, then go back to speaking Chinese. Just very random. It seems very out of the blue. So, that's very interesting, waiting for those points to come in. And so you do get to hear a little bit. So those are interesting. Like I said, personally, I enjoy them. Like I said, despite not being able to understand the language, just visually, not bad. Just for fun. Now, to get to today's movie, Drift Z. Now, this movie, at first, it's interesting because at first I really enjoyed it, and then watched it a few more times, and I realized, honestly, while it's not a bad watch, it really isn't that fun either, to be honest. It's obviously a lower budget movie. You can tell because pretty much all of the racing is portrayed as in fast forward. All the car motion is fast forwarded through. And while that may not be terrible, it's something that I really don't like in any car movie because it's usually very obvious. If there's a way to shoot it so that the camera, that everything is sped up, yet it's not, it doesn't look sped up, then I would love to see that. But most of the time when you can tell a car is going around a corner at a much faster speed than it should be able to travel, like I said, that usually a good sign that that they sped up the film, and it's like just like I said, not a personal, I don't really like that much, but that's only one thing about the movie. The main story follows a character. Well, actually, it doesn't even really follow the. There is no actual main character. You could say there is a main racer, but he's not. The story doesn't really focus around him. The story opens with a group of kids on a mountain pass. They race for fun. One guy, young man, he owns a Porsche 911. And, I will say this: pretty much all the cars in here are obviously stock, or just completely stock. They didn't. If you watch the movie, due to obviously the lower budget, you can tell that they didn't really do a lot of work on these cars. Like there's one point where he opens up the back of the Porsche, because the engine's in the back. Looks at it, points at it, and they talk about it being souped up, but you can very clearly see that everything is completely, it's completely stock. That's all right and passable in most cases, even in this, because they really don't go into any tech talk really. So I think that is a plus on their side. If you, like I said, as I said, unlike One Gun Midnight, where they had the dialogue, talking about an engine that's twin turbo when it's clearly naturally aspirated. It's it changes some things. Here they stay away from that, so that that does give them credit, and it doesn't make them look worse. One thing that is said in the movie is that this mountain pass area is essentially owned by this small village over here, and I'm not gonna lie, there's a lot of cliches. There's a business tycoon who wants to come in and buy the area up, whether it be by just buying it outright or by subterfuge. He wants to acquire the land, and it's not. I mean, he does come across as very as the evil. It's almost mustache twirling at times, so it is very funny. But he also fancies himself a racer. He likes. When at the beginning of the movie, you don't know this until a little bit later, but he's been buying up bits of property around, and he wants this one area of the mountain pass, which supposedly is somehow he's found a way to acquire it through means if he can get the proper signatures. Unbeknownst to any of the other characters, so he goes out and challenges the young man in the Porsche to a race. And says, hey, if I win, I get the mountain, and they're like, what does that even mean? They're kids, they don't understand. What's that supposed to mean? Yeah. So he says, well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you this. He opens up a briefcase, shows him a briefcase full of money, and says, so let's tell you what, if you win, you get all this. And of course, at the end of the race, he beats the young man. He's driving, and interestingly enough, and this is one thing that confuses a lot of people, and that is that he's driving a Peugeot. Couldn't really tell you which kind. Sadly, Peugeot is not a car I'm that familiar with. I know a few of them, but he said not too much. But it's not known for being a particularly, at least the one he has is not known for being a particularly fast car. Yet he beats the young man fair and square in a race down the mountain pass. And so of course the young man's kind of humiliated, and he says, and he tells him, well, just sign this, and we'll call the race even. So the young man doesn't think about what he's signing, signs it, and then you come to find out that that's has to do with something about his signature is just as valid as his father's signature in signing over land and that. So again, as I said, subterfuge to try and get it. His girlfriend is there. Of course, his father, smacks him around a little bit. His girlfriend is there. She's, she's, a little bit embarrassed for him. His girlfriend goes home and asks her father about, what is it about the mountain pass and all that, and her father explains about the village owning it and owning the land, and that's when she understands what happened, what happened in this whole situation of him signing over the deed, unknowingly. So, uh, the next day they're out driving, and all of a sudden he's passed by this very old, looks like a 240 or 280Z. Uh, you know, nice little car. Anybody knows, again, from Long Gone Midnight. That's actually why I got this movie. Was it, the kind of reminded me of that little old thing. So it's a great little car. Uh, he's out there, or tooling around. It's also been very obvious that he's been going around the country beating a lot of people, and that's essentially how he makes his living. He goes out there, races, mountain passes, wins, you know, and you come to find out later. You don't know this early on. I'm not doing a whole lot of spoilers here, but this is actually the girlfriend of the boy with the Porsche. This is actually her older brother, who she doesn't recognize. He's been gone for several years because her father essentially kicked him out of their house for being a street racer. He said, street racers are no good. I want you out of my house. So, he took his car and left. So she doesn't recognize him. So it's made all the more interesting by the fact that she, finds him very fascinating. First she thinks his Z is cool, and her boyfriend's like, well, my Porsche is way faster than that. So they have a race. They have a race down the mountain. Of course, the Porsche loses, and the young man gets very, very angry. He confronts him. At which point, the driver of the Z, explains that he's actually her older brother, and he's not trying to hit on his girlfriend. Of course, being the boyfriend, he's a little bit jealous that his girlfriend would be fascinated by somebody else. That's typical kids, or typical most people, honestly. But it actually goes from being amusing, where he hates the driver of the Z, to he actually finds him very wants to be very good friends with him, to the point where he starts calling him brother. And he says, there's one point where he goes, don't call me that. He goes, well, if I marry her, I'll, you really will be my brother. So why not call you that now? So I always thought that point was a little amusing, because he never argues with it. It's like, oh yeah, I guess that's true. But he wants to see his family again. He's been gone for several years. Comes back, tries to talk to his father. His father is angry at him. Partially because he was a racer, partially because he left. He feels kind of offended. You turned your back on your family, that kind of thing. Now, what happens next is, again, we're going down the path of cliches, and this is why the movie, sadly, to me, isn't that interesting. More because it becomes, as I said, more cliche-ridden, as opposed to actually, I just think they could have done a little bit better story writing if they had tried, but this, some of this comes down to budget and that. So, of course, as he's been winning all the property around town, or buying it outright. The businessman wants to get everything, together, and so the young man in the Z decides, hey, this isn't right. I'm gonna solve this problem. So, he figures out the reason the Peugeot was winning was because the Peugeot was using nitrous. Not bad at that time in movies. It really wasn't particularly common, again, it's not that commonly used. But he decides that, I may not be able to beat him either if I don't use nitrous too. So he goes to one of his old friends, has her, she's a young lady mechanic. Sadly, I think she is only briefly in one or two scenes. But she agrees to hook his car up with nitrous. The problem with this racing scene, other than the fact, there's several actually. And this, again, goes down to, I think, some people not having experience in shooting vehicles in motion. Like I said, he challenges him to a race. Winner gets the deeds for the, mountain. He has the last. He convinces his father is. Or they crash into his father's and send him to the hospital, and attempt to kidnap his sister too, in an attempt to get him to hand over the deed to the last deed that they need. And the father finally relents and gives his son the deed, and the son says, I've got the last thing you need. We race. I win. You, I take back the deeds you essentially stole. You win. You get the last one. So of course he accepts, and the race is on. Part of the reason this race isn't that interesting, honestly, is because it's a Peugeot versus a very old Z. It's not a race that I don't think anybody would expect to be that. Even though it's not that especially the Z. It's not that it's not a good car. It's just that it's not that interesting to a car to watch. If you look at a couple of cars from the '70s, it's like watching a couple cars from the '70s isn't that fun. As much as it is watching more modern cars that are obviously souped up. Here you have two cars that are clearly stock, and nothing. It's like, okay, that's not that fun to watch. The other, as I said, the car angles, that comes down to, I think, camera and experience, filming cars. So that one might be sort of excusable, but again, the speeding up the film so that everything looks faster, it doesn't look good when racing. And despite the fact that this movie is called Drift Z, there's almost no drifting done in it. You'd think with Mountain Pass Racing, there would be a fair amount of opportunities for it, and I think there are some opportunities. They're just not used very well. And unfortunately, most of the drifting is what I like to call unnecessary drifting. Now, most people who drift know that, or even people who don't, know that drifting can get you through a corner much faster. However, if you have a very slow arcing turn, there's no point in drifting through that because all you're going to do is lose speed. And unfortunately, now that's fine if you're in a drift competition where that's the point. You're supposed to be drifting to look good. But in an actual race, it's not efficient. It's one of the less efficient ways to move your car. And several times they show them drifting through this very slow arcing turn. It's like, all that would do is slow down your car. That wouldn't give you a benefit. It's better to grip through that kind of corner and drift through the much sharper corners. Again, some of it comes down to, I think that honestly just comes down to the director and the stunt coordinator. And it's like, okay, it looks cool, but for the purposes of the race, it's very inefficient for an actual race to drive that way. So that was more than a little disappointing. Like I said, it's the unnecessary drift. When it's necessary, it's great. When it's unnecessary, it honestly, again, goes to making it look unrealistic, because a real driver, a real racer would know when to drift and when not to drift. Here, he's just drifting through this long banking corner, and it doesn't do him any good. It wouldn't do him any good in a real race. Now, of course, as you may have guessed, towards the end they both, the Peugeot is using his NOS. This again also goes to the movie being very unrealistic. They hold down the NOS like crazy, and anybody who uses nitrous knows that you don't hold it down for a long time. You'll blow your engine. Your engine has to have time to cool down after a blast. Usually, give or take, around 10 seconds is a good length for a blast of nitrous, and you don't really want to push it much beyond that. Even with a reinforced engine, it still could cause some severe damage. These guys are constantly holding. Anytime the other one, or especially the Peugeot, anytime the Z starts to get close, he hits the NOS. Pulls out a little ways. Lets it off. Z catches up a little bit, puts up, just doesn't. And then the very end, the reason the young man with the Z asked them to soup up his Z with nitrous is there's a long straightaway, and he's like, okay, this is the perfect place to use it, and he's holding the NOS for like 30 seconds. It's like, no. I'm sorry, I don't care what you've done to that Z, you're gonna fry your engine doing like that if it doesn't outright explode. Like I said, I enjoyed it. It's not an altogether bad movie, but the problems with it are being cliched written, riddled and not particularly realistic racing. And I know unrealistic racing, is pretty much a staple of most car movies, but here it's very pronounced, and to a disappointing effect. It's one of those, like, honestly, I think if the racing action had been better, the rest of the movie would have been elevated. As I said, I've always noticed that a lot of Asian movies have good drama, but not so great on the racing aspect. Not that the American movies are any better, but I'm just saying that I specifically noticed that dynamic. Great drama, crappy racing. And this one isn't, like I said, while the script is cliched, I do think it works, unfortunately, towards that end. As, the acting is actually solid, if not a little bit over the top by the villain. But, overall, it's an enjoyable watch. It's not gonna, I don't think it's gonna offend your sensibilities. The racing is disappointing, but other than that, it's alright. So, up next will be, I'll actually be coming back over to the US. I was going to do a Drift Beauty battle next, but I'm actually going to come back over for one more American movie. This will be the last American movie I'm doing before the grand finale, which is a piece of work. But just simply called Street Racer. It's honestly not a very good movie, but for some reason it feels like it's got heart, and I can't bring myself to hate it because of that. Well, there are certain aspects that I hate, but other than that, it's somehow I can't bring myself to dislike it completely. Until next time, that's my opinion. Take it for what it's worth. Speculative Dude, out. 0
to 60 in 3.5. Baby, you got the key. Now shut up and drive.